Alright, so I wanted to kind of talk to you guys a little bit about something that I'm kind of going through right now and go a little bit deeper into our mobility and flexibility talk that we've done in the past. And so I've actually had a hamstring strain that is related to potentially some glute issues and my feet flattening, particularly my left one that has now developed what's called plantar fasciitis, which is an inflammation of the fascial tissue that connects the Achilles tendon basically throughout your toes. It's like this little webbing that kind of spreads out here, and that's also kind of related to a little bit of a calcaneus instability that I have got going on. This might be my use of minimal shoes while working on hard concrete floors for long hours out of the day. It can be a lot of things that are contributing to that. And although I'm starting to see some improvements with the corrective exercises that I've been doing, as well as some flexibility work, but some of the things that I've kind of learned and gone into more detail with have kind of changed my approach a little bit to flexibility. Now, a lot of what we talked about in the past is going to be more geared towards general flexibility rather than corrective, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about flexibility and how we can start to target specific muscles. Now, when we've talked about, I think that we've talked about anatomy already, talked about the different muscles that attach and where, and so we know that, for example, that it's called the quadriceps because there's actually 4 muscles that are involved in this complex. We've got the 3 vastus muscles, right? So the vastus lateralis, medialis, and intermittus, and which all attach at the hip bone and then go into this quadricep tendon here that goes above and below our kneecap and attaches into our femur here, or not femur, tibia here. I know my anatomy. Whereas the rectus femoris is actually also a hip flexor, so it goes into the same tendon down here, goes up the middle, and then attaches up higher in the hip. So it actually works on flexing here, whereas the vastus muscles are not really hip flexors. They are really just going to be leg extensors, right? And so why is this important? Well, there are going to be instances where you might have feelings of knee instability because your kneecap is not tracking straight, right? And so if you have a tight vastus lateralis, for example, your kneecap might be moving off the center line, and that could be causing some lateral knee pain here. And so if you were to just go through a standard quad stretch, which is going to be just standing here with your heel directly behind your hip, right? So you guys can see that that's going straight here. I'm not going into this big extension here because I don't need to, right? If I'm working on my vastus muscles because they're not hip flexors per se, when I go out like this, what you'll actually see is that this angle here between my femur and my tibia is actually opening up when I go into this arabesque kind of feeling. Now you might feel like you're getting more of a stretch, but that's going to be because of the rectus femoris, right? That muscle that goes over the hip and actually works on hip flexion, right? So what I really want to be doing if I'm working on the vastus muscles is I want to be closing that angle, right? So I'm pushing my knee straight to the ground while I'm pulling my heel into my butt. Now what you can find here is if I were to grab with the opposite hand, I'm starting to feel that stretch here on my vastus medialis, right? If I were to start to go the opposite direction and I move to the outside, now I'm doing this very gently, guys. It's really important that I'm not doing anything that's going to be putting rotational torque into my ligaments here, right? I'm going to go ahead and bring this back because I'm having some issues stabilizing. But in order for me to get into the vastus lateralis, I'm going to start moving my leg out to the outside here while pulling my heel in. And I'm just going a little bit, and you'll actually be able to feel that stretch move from the center line to the outside to the inside. Now, if we just stay here in the proper stretch position, we're going to be targeting the whole complex, but mostly that midline, which is going to be more anatomically correct, right? So we don't want to be making a habit of always going into this what's actually internal rotation, right? So what's happening here is my hip is going this way, my knee points inward, internal rotation. So even though my heel is technically moving outward, right, in this position, it's internal rotation, right? So by going into that internal rotation, if I'm always stretching this and I'm not directly stretching this, then I'm going to be creating the opposite imbalance, right? I'm going to be making this muscle tighter in relation to this one, and that's going to offset that balance. So if you're not having a lateral knee tracking issue and you are always stretching just that vastus lateralis, then your vastus medialis is going to be it's going to be tighter in relation to the lateralis, right? So this goes back to when we talk about corrective stretching versus generalized stretching, right? Is that when we do generalized stretching, which we do after our workout, not before, right? Because when we stretch, we actually are weakening those muscles, and we might be actually contributing more to existing muscle imbalances. We can increase the risk of injury. But chronic stretching, so stretching every day, at the end of your workout will actually increase the mobility of the muscles without necessarily causing any higher risk for injury. Versus if you were to stretch everything beforehand, you could actually be contributing to a problem that's already there. Now, should you do static stretching or dynamic stretching or neuromuscular stretching before your workout? And we will do a video later on about the differences between those three and different styles of stretching, and we'll touch on it a little bit today. But when it comes to stretching before your workout, you can do some stretching, and I definitely would because of this plantar fascia issue, right? So for me, what I've got going on is that I've got the lateral hamstring, which is going to be the biceps femoris long head in this case, not the short head, because where I can feel it is I can actually feel the issue especially when I go into hip hinge. What's actually happening with me is that if I were to do a single leg deadlift on this foot with my foot on the floor, not so much of a problem if I have my foot raised onto a block or something like that. What happens is that the tension from my hip goes down this lateral aspect. It's going to go into the lateral aspect of my gastrocnemius and soleus, and it's going to pull the calcaneus off to the side, which is going to force my foot to flatten, and it's going to put extra strain onto that plantar fascia. And when I try to do a hip hinge movement, like a deadlift, single leg deadlift, something along those lines, potentially even in a squat, but I haven't really had that problem yet, I'll feel this intense tearing in the bottom of my foot, and that's actually quite painful. So, and another symptom of that is you're going to feel that tightness, especially first thing in the morning when you have this issue. So when we are, when I'm about to start to work out, that's going to be a major issue for me. So especially if I do get to the point where I can start single leg deadlifting on this leg again, I'm going to be wanting to do stretches that are going to release this side of my body so that I don't put extra tension on the calcaneus, which is again this heel bone, and have that work its way down into the plantar fascia. Okay, hopefully that's not too intricate or too in depth for you. So I would actually want to, in this case, do some stretching, do some active, some SMRs, like foam rolling using a lacrosse ball, things like that, before my workout to correct this issue so that when I work out, it's less likely to become aggravated by the workout. But I don't want to be doing more stretching on top of that, right? I don't want to be trying to stretch out all of the hamstring complex, all of the gastrocnemius and whatnot before my workout when I have this problem, because again, that's not going to help me get into a state of balance, right? Where the calcaneus is tracking properly, that I'm not putting too much pressure into that plantar fascia, and that I'm not exacerbating this strain. So let's go ahead and we're going to start kind of floor up. So I've actually got a post on the other side of this fabric here. So for my soleus stretch, right, remember that the soleus attaches into the Achilles tendon here that attaches to the calcaneus, and it actually stops below the knee on the tibia and fibia here. And yeah, anyways, and so it's not going to do me any good to try to stretch the soleus with a straight leg. What's actually going to happen there, because the gastrocnemius covers it and actually goes above this, is the tension from the gastrocnemius is actually going to prevent me from getting into that soleus. So I'm going to actually bend my knee, and then I'm going to start to push this column away. Now this hits the complex evenly, but if I turn to the side so that my toes point this way, and then I turn back towards the column and hit that same stretch, that was a little bit extreme. So I've got about a 45-degree angle here, and I start going through the same stretch. Now I'm hitting more of that lateral aspect. If I wanted to hit the other aspect, I would turn my leg the other way, which you can feel when you're doing that. When you turn out and try to stretch into that, it's going to flatten your foot. And because this foot is already having a flattening issue, what I actually want to be doing is I actually want that arch to be not lifting, but I don't want to be trying to push that arch flat. So I want to be feeling all that pressure around the lateral aspect of that. And again, pay very, very close attention to what's going on under your knee. If it feels at all uncomfortable, remember we recently, I think, have discussed heel hooks, for example, that when you start to go for a heel hook, you are isolating the femur so it can't move, and then you're rotating the heel, and that will tear out all the ligaments in the knee. So we want to be very careful. If it feels at all weird, don't continue going with this, right? So I'm going to point my foot 45 degrees here, and then I'm going to bring my hip straight towards the column, paying very close attention that nothing feels weird in that knee. And I'm just getting into that soleus with bent knee. Now, I'm going to step my foot back. I'm going to try to keep my heel pushed to the ground. And it doesn't really necessarily matter if it's like actually planted and rooted into the floor here. But I'm going to have my toes pointed this way. And I'm going to be nice and tall as I bring my hips forward, and I can feel that stretch going through my lateral gastrocnemius, right? And I can do a more dynamic stretch by swinging my leg into it, but I want to be really careful with that because, again, we are potentially adding in some rotation into the knee, so I want you guys to be very, very careful with that. Now, when we start going into up the leg, before we do that, we can hit the peroneus longus, right? The peroneus longus attaches along the lateral side here and attaches here, right, to the side of your foot. And one of the reasons why this can be a contributing muscle is that if you're pulling up on that lateral side of the foot, it's going to flatten that arch even more. So we want strength through that anterior tibialis, which attaches to your arch here and comes over to the front of your shin, right? And it actually pulls your foot up into that more anatomically correct position. So if I want to, I can sickle my foot and just move my ankle that way, nice and gently here, to get into that peroneus longus a little bit. All right, so the chair. So this is, I've been doing this a lot at work. I work at a restaurant right now. Haven't been training for a while. And so we have these nice high bar stools, and I've actually found them quite helpful because if the movement for a deadlift, right, this single leg deadlift position here, I'm going to go until I feel pain, right? Right there I can feel pain in that plantar fascia. It's not as bad as it's been because I've actually been working pretty hard. I can go a little bit deeper into that. But I can definitely feel where there's that incorrect tension, right, going along that lateral edge, and especially right now since I've already stretched out a little bit into this biceps femoris long head, right? So what I'm going to do, this is actually lower than the ones at work. I thought it would be too high. I want to actually think about, like a lot of people, and we talked about this on the other flexibility videos, where people are just like, I'm going to bring my nose to my knee, right? I don't want to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I want to have a happy deer tail, right? So tail goes up, right? So I'm straightening out my back, trying to give myself as much of a natural arch as I possibly can. I don't want to be rounded forward too much, and I try to get nice and tall. Now, because this is tight for me, I can't hinge forward any further than that right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take my toes and I'm going to point them out to the outside here. You can, especially right now, I'm feeling like a lot of tension right here in the gastroc. So I can point my toes a little bit to take that tension off so I can actually isolate out that hamstring a little bit more. So this is going to shorten the calf muscle by pointing my toe, and it allows me to put more of that stretch directly into the hamstring so I can focus on that a little bit more. There's nothing wrong with also hitting this, because again, it is a kinetic chain going from the top to the bottom here. But if I really want to get into that hamstring strain, I'm going to move my heel off that a little bit. By turning my leg out, now I can actually hit that lateral aspect much cleaner, right? And you could play around with this, guys. If you wanted to have this as part of your general stretching for not necessarily for corrective purposes, you can, turn your knee inward to get that medial side, right? And practice working on the turning in and out for that, okay? Now, for this particular issue, it does actually is part of my glute complex issue. So, one of the things that we've talked about when we're talking about corrective is that when you have your feet flatten, you tend to have a little bit of a knee valgus, right? So, you could have some piriformis tightness. You can have tightness in which sciatica can actually play into this particular issue. But you can have tightness in your glute minimus. You can have tightness in your glute medius. Remember, your glute medius actually does external and internal rotation, where your glute minimus causes internal rotation, glute maximus external rotation, right? And so for like piriformis, I actually like to, I'm going to turn it this way so you can actually see what I'm doing. But I'm going to lean here, right? So I just lay my leg on here, and then I'm just going to do a little bit of a squat here, right? And I find that if you're using a bench like this, my hip on the supporting side, if I put too much weight on it, especially if I'm locking it out, I'm going to have some popping in my hip. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a little plie here, right? And I'm just going to drop my hips back a little bit and straighten out my back to try to get that tension in there. And then I'm going to turn towards my knee and get a nice stretch in there, right? And I just like to, in this case, I do like to tend to go through my entire glute complex. So this is doing a little bit of that external rotation. I know what I said, but yes. So other stretches that you can kind of hit through here, and again, with this one, if you wanted to change where you're feeling that, you can change how much of turn you put into your body, right? Which is actually more of how you turn your hips, right? So your hips are going to follow your shoulders. So the more I turn my shoulders this way, the more my hips are going to follow, which is going to change the angle between my pelvis bone and my femur here. Okay? Same is going to be true here, right? I can move through this stretch. So high knee, turning my chest towards here. Again, this could be working a lot more into the glute major, right? And now, if I wanted to get more of kind of that adductor complex and whatnot, I can go up to the side, and again, for here, right, right now my toes are pointed straight up, and I can move through all these different adductors here by just turning my knee over, and I can do that from a static position. And I can feel where things are a little bit more tight. So that's a lot of the principle that I kind of want to get by for you guys. So we talked about, changing the angle in this stretch. And I actually have had a little bit of an epiphany a little bit with this warrior 2 position, right? So I've got a nice straight leg, belly button pushed in, I push my hips forward, and I seek my hips here. Take my arm, raise over my head. And one of the things that I think I may have been missing in the way that I've trained people in the past with this particular position is that when people have tension, they will externally rotate their hip here, right? They'll open up their hip, and then they're like, why am I not feeling a stretch? So I want to actually think about taking this portion of my iliac crest and turning it towards this front knee, right? The more I kind of close that angle, and now I can get into that stretch a lot more, getting into that hip flexor complex. So just kind of some thoughts and things for you guys to play with to start seeing, okay, how can I get into these specific muscles where I might have excess tightness? Remember to breathe through these stretches. Remember to kind of relax into them. And really do it more clinically when you are doing it pre-workout, right? Post-workout, you can kind of go through everything and just try to really get kind of a generalized stretch going. But for clinical, for trying to correct a muscle imbalance, it's really, really important that we just focus on the things that are tight and that are causing problems before the workout, so that we don't increase our risk for injury. So I hope this helps. I hope it's illuminating for you guys. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below or email me directly. I usually try to make videos, or I'll try to email you back if I do see something that's like, oh yeah, that's a very good question, or something like that. So I'm here for you guys. So you guys have a lovely afternoon, and hopefully we'll get on the mat soon. Again, if you guys are in the Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia area, I am looking for a new guy to help me demonstrate wrestling moves and to kind of revitalize this channel. I think that when we start up again, we are going to be starting with the gi mostly, because I think that, and especially for people that I've talked to who have been following this channel for a while and then started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they were actually like, oh my god, the gi helps me actually practice in the beginning and is actually very effective. So I think I want to get a little bit more emphasis on the gi in the beginning here, and then we'll start going into other things. Also, if you are an experienced teacher, or you were a wrestler at some point in time and you want to share some of the more folk style, freestyle, pro wrestling, kushti, or whatever style that you practiced in the past, and you want to add that to this channel, then I will give you the passwords, guys. I will make you a moderator on this channel and in the groups and whatnot, because I want to hear your voices. I want to hear your individual experiences, because that's what's going to give our community strength. Any other ways I can support you guys, let me know, and I'll be here for you. Have a good one.